SpectreVision Radio. SpectreVision Radio.
Hello and welcome to the Modern Fairy Sightings Podcast, where we listen to people's fairy encounters. But take heed, we're not talking about winged Tinkerbells here. These are real fairies, real encounters that took people like you and I by surprise. Stay a while and hear their stories. My name is Jo Hickey Hall, and I'm a folklore researcher. Hello everybody and welcome to the Fairy Sightings Podcast. I'm Jo Hickey Hall and I'm smiling away here because Mike Clelland, who probably needs no introduction to anyone that watches Modern Fairy Sightings, is one of my favourite people to interview, and we're so overdue a chat. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you. It's my honor. I'm glad to be here.
So, yeah, it's great to get together again, and it's kind of a special show today because, as people will have seen from the new intro that goes along with this show, something new is happening, and that something new is SpectreVision, and we have both joined SpectreVision. So yeah, I'm just really excited about that, and I'm so delighted that you are, part of this crew, and that we've kind of, got each other, hopefully, to sort of bounce ideas off and just be, I guess, a community. But yeah, it was great to see you with SpectreVision.
And I wasn't quite sure what it was. I got a contact. A fellow named Daniel contacted me, and what he did is he listed a bunch of other podcasts that were also on this platform or this network. I know they do. I think they do music as well as film production type things, as well as podcast platforms. In the list of other podcasts was you, and I saw that, and then it was also, do you know there's a show called Weird Studies? Have you heard that at all? Yes, they're out of Canada. They're French Canadian. And then Strange Familiars with Timothy Renner. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's really exciting. We're joining such an array of brilliant offerings, and Strange Familiars was one that that joined fairly recently, and I was kind of, oh, wow, this is really exciting. There's there's Haunted Objects too. I don't know, were you a fan of?
I don't know this Haunted Objects one.
Right, well, it's kind of an offshoot of, did you ever get into Hellier? That's
I never did follow Hellier, though I've met the two people who run Hellier. I'm drawing a blank on their names, the husband and wife team. So I wanted to, but I tried to start. I never could quite. Yeah.
Yeah. I heavily got into it in lockdown, and it's quite addictive, to be honest. So, and then this is their podcast that kind of goes along with that. And I believe they're off making a new series soon. So, because I'm a member of their Patreon, I'm a member of your Patreon too. And I'm a member of Strange Familiars Patreon. I love the communities. I don't always get to chat to the other communities because I have my own Patreon, of course. But I really like to kind of keep up with, what's happening and the exciting things that, people are getting up to. So yeah, it's nice to be among like-minded, folk.
Oh yeah. And Kelly Chase and Jay King do a podcast called Cosmosis, and there was another one. I'll think of it in a moment here. And then a part of the small crew. It's like the small crew that's running this platform. One of them is a fellow Jim Perry, who hosted a podcast called Euphomet, and that was a really highly produced. He had like music coming in, and he really edited the audio, so it was almost like a documentary soundscape, and it really was great. And then he went to did a show called Nightscape, Night Drift, and that was more of a straight kind of, that felt, you know what it felt like, is coast to coast, like a
Yeah.
late night kind of radio show like that. And I've met Jim a few times. If he's involved, I'm content. So yeah, it sounds like a great thing. Now, this is a funny thing to say. I do, you are doing a very similar type of work that I'm doing, and you end up kind of knowing people that are psychics.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this one psychic told me recently, like not two, was it a couple weeks ago, kind of said, I got a good feeling about something's coming up for you. I got a good feeling about something coming up for you. And then it was within a day or so that I got that message from Daniel, and I got back to this person, and they said, that's it. So I tend to trust those kinds of things, just to, you got to kind of weave your way down this path. But yeah, it seemed a very easy decision. And honestly, it was mostly just to be among a team of comrades that I connect so strongly with, just felt great.
Yeah, I felt exactly that. And it's funny that you should say it kind of came after this message that you received, because the way that I joined SpectreVision and first heard from the team, I had a huge synchronicity around joining, and it was really mad. So, I'm writing my book, which is why I'm always kind of head down and squirreling away at the moment. But the week that I was writing a chapter about, it was the chapter that included the episode they want to talk to us, that it's called, and it's an encounter in South Wales with this guy who, as a child, he was camping with his family, and he wanders into a wood next to the beach, and he meets these small white beings, and they kind of take him onto what seems like a craft. And during that interview, he said to me, the bit in Lord of the Rings when Frodo puts on the ring and everything changes. And
Mm-hmm.
so that week, I am writing my book and I'm including that encounter. So this is the chapter I'm working on. And in those few days, I've written those words into the book when Frodo puts his ring on and everything changes. And in those few days, I receive an email from SpectreVision. And of course, it's Elijah Wood. He played Frodo. And
Yeah.
it was really that synchronicity that made me feel this is a yes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, of course, you sit and you once you've got over the idea that, oh wow, this is really exciting, then you're moving into joining all these other folks. But really, it was that really mad synchronicity that was the yes for me. So I feel like, for some people, they might not quite understand, people like you and I who effectively live our lives in this way. But I feel like we're not alone. I know we're not alone in that. And I think that it's a very normal way in which to kind of reach for meaning. When there's things happening in your life and you notice them, you do get kind of channeled down various paths, and they're always the right paths. So
Yeah, the best analogy I've heard for synchronicity as a way to guide your life is less, I used to say it was like, walking down the path and there'd be a sign on the path, turn right, turn left. And there's a fellow, Alan Green, who was doing synchronicity research, and he said, well, it's more like being on the open ocean on a cloudy day without I guess I was going to say without GPS, but without a compass, you're helpless to know which way to travel. And so that synchronicity would be that compass. You can refer to synchronicity, you can, in the same way you would refer to a compass on a boat in the open ocean. So that felt like a little better of a metaphor, and I really made a conscious decision to do that probably around 2008 or so. that's 17, 18 years ago now. I made a very conscious decision that I am going to trust this. I'm going to trust this in my life. I'm going to put my life in the hands of this mysterious guiding force. And I'll tell you what happened is a lot of stuff just crumbled. Well, there was kind of crumbling anyway. I was dealing with sort of a set of issues. Well, here, I'll tell you what I was dealing with. I was at that point, I was kind of at this threshold where in my youth, I kind of said, oh, I had these experiences and they had UFOs in them. Like I have these memories with UFOs. I was with other people and I saw UFOs and then I had a missing time event when I was 12. So turn the clock back, I must have been in my late 40s, in 2008 or so. And it was like, when you make a tea and the kettle's on, just before it whistles, the flames under there, it's just before it whistles, there's almost like this collective tension that's in the kitchen. Like, because the whistle is going to be loud and it's going to be, so that this thing is just about to whistle. And that's what it felt my life was like. That something was right there. Like, oh, I cannot. And I was doing everything I could to push it back and deny it and not take it and not treat it seriously. Like I did not want this to be a reality. And the tea kettle boiled and my life just turned upside down. And what was happening was I was flooded with synchronicities between about 2006 and about 2013, like crazy volume of people around me were seeing it too. Like people around me would just be like, how is this happening? And it really rocked the foundation of everything. And I just was like, I'm going to let go and just follow this. And that's easy to say and hard to do. And consequently, everything changed. Like I just like situations arose and I moved out of my house and I moved across the country and I started writing books. I had been a professional illustrator and I stopped doing illustration work. And people are like, who knew me are like, they don't even understand that. That was my identity, was this guy who drew all the time. And that afterwards I was, the writing process is a creative outlet and it was something totally new to me to throw myself into the writing. And so in the last decade plus, I've written 4 books, and that's been a really powerful outlet. But it was not the memories of what might or might not have happened in the context of some sort of UFO encounter. That's not what was rocking my world. It was the synchronicities that were just so impressive. And so my research is owls on one level, and then UFOs was initially how I got into this, and I feel like the UFO thing has, as the years go on, I'm less and less interested. I don't want to say I'm bored with them because that's not true, but I'm sort of bored with them, and it's more a collective of other events, paranormal type events, that all seem connected to owls. It's not just UFOs. And so it'd be owls, UFOs, and synchronicity were the 3 things. And I tried to keep them level in my mind, right? So like a synchronicity you can dismiss a synchronicity. It's hard to dismiss. You can dismiss an owl sighting too. And you can but it's tough to dismiss like seeing a flying saucer in the sky. That's kind of a tough one. But I did my very best to weight those equally, and trust each of them equally. Having a synchronicity was very common, and some sort of UFO sighting was incredibly rare. But I tried to treat those equally. And so I talk to people sometimes and they're like, well, I don't have anything happen to me in my life. And I'm like, do you have any synchronicities? And they go, oh my gosh, I get synchronicities all the time, powerful synchronicities. And I'm like, don't you deny those. Those are magical events that need to be, you need to pay attention.
It goes in hand with the letting go, Mike, doesn't it? As you said, and I've said at the beginning, you need no introduction, and that's true for my watchers. But in case people are, hearing you for the first time and seeing you for the first time, your work is, it's huge. Your contribution to the area of this kind of research is huge. You have been you were the author of The Messengers, looking at owls, synchronicities, and UFO experiences. And then you have written The Messengers, the stories, which contained a lot of the stories that you couldn't find in Messengers. You wrote a novel too, and you've also got the hidden experience. Well, your novel was called The Unseen, which we'll talk about in a moment. Because you've got another novel that you're going to be bringing out.
Oh, it's coming along slow. So, but that's the plan. Yeah.
Yeah. And your podcast Hidden Experience, which is fantastic too. So, was there another book too? Or is that the
Well, one book is called Hidden Experience, and that's a memoir.
right?
And what that was, I started a blog in 2009. And what happened was very early on, the blog was originally just going to be my own synchronicities. And I have a lot of them, and they make really nice blog posts, right? You got a kind of tidy beginning, middle, and end. And for the most part, they can be kind of short. And so I was like, I'll just put my synchronicities up there. And right away, these UFO type things felt like they were forcing themselves into the blog. So I was like, I got to trust this. So I was just writing these UFO accounts and putting those on the blog too. And then it just felt like my world fell apart. Well, like I wasn't ready. Like I was never going to be ready. It was up to I want to say the gods or whatever term you want to use, that triumphant force just felt like it was forcing me to pay attention to this stuff. So that memoir was the blog was me writing about my insecurities, my fears, my doubts, what was happening. So instead of a memoir where someone might say, well, 10 years ago, I had this powerful experience and I woke up one morning. Instead, on the blog, it was, this happened to me last night and I'm trying to make sense of it right now. And so that blog had a sort of urgency and power to it. And I mean, I've got 1,000 blog posts on that thing over time, but there's probably, I boiled that down to about 80 strong blog posts. And then I did a lot of editorializing and kind of sharing, in retrospective and stuff. So it's sort of that my own awakening experience is documented in real time in these blog posts or diary entries or whatever. And then I go about and sort of try to make sense of that, back and forth between the posts and my own hard work. So the blog began in 2009 and I wrote the book in 2019. And at that point I had already switched over into doing I stopped really posting on the blog in 2019 and started doing full-time writing, and I stopped doing the podcast. The writing just took over my life. And you know what? Honestly, the blog as a format kind of just fizzled and got replaced by sort of more Instagram type. It just felt like people don't have the patience for a blog. I guess presently there's Substack, and I have considered doing something like that because it feels like that's a platform that actually seems to be working, where blogging doesn't mean the same thing that it did in 2007, 8, 9.
Yeah, I'm noticing that too. I'm not on Substack, but I do follow people on Substack, and yeah, it really does seem to be taking off. So yeah, for sure. I mean, I guess that's another thing to do. It sounds like you've got your hands full at the moment. But how is the new novel going? Because we decided to have a chat also because we met recently on the Edgeways presentation that you did a month or two ago, a couple of months ago, and we kind of got onto the subject of deers. I don't know if your presentation with Edgeways is now available.
Yeah, I don't know.
It probably is in that case, if you haven't specified that it couldn't be. So people could probably find that, I guess, on YouTube, but it's Edgeways, and it's a group that offer talks every Saturday night here in London time. And anybody can come along, but you need to join Edgeways to join that. But so yeah, could you talk a little about what was happening with your, because it kind of leads on from your first novel and around deer and deer stories.
Well, my novel. So what happened is I had, most of my work in the books is I'll take a story and just tell someone else's story, and a lot of them are my own stories. But I'll tell a story that has to do often with, well, pretty much 100% of the time with an owl, and whether it has to do with a UFO or not kind of comes and goes. And there's other. So I'll just list them. So the things that are connected to owls in my research are UFOs, meditation, shamanic initiation, psychedelics, and death. So that's 5 things. Initially, all I was interested in was the UFO thing, but in the last 15 years of collecting these stories, I've seen a very clear pattern. You know what's interesting? I have no owl accounts connected to the near-death experience. They might be out there. No one has contacted me. Doesn't it? It seems like the perfect thing. It would fit. But so what it tells me is that it's not that the owls are connected to UFOs. It's the owls are connected to these highly charged human experiences. That's the term I'm using. And the owl's sighting is certainly a highly charged human experience, but so is, the owl is not connected to the UFO. The UFO is a highly charged human experience, as well as meditation and shamanic initiation, psychedelics, and death. And I could talk easily an hour on any one of those subjects.
But that's interesting that owls haven't been in connection with near-death experiences. Not one.
Doesn't it seem like it would fit perfectly? It might be out there. I simply don't have the stories. Here's what I can say. If someone has had an owl experience, a UFO experience, and a near-death experience, their psychic abilities are like off the charts, or their healing abilities are off the charts. Do you know Chris Bledsoe, his story?
Right. Yes, I do. Yeah.
So Chris Bledsoe had a near-death experience. He was shot in the back with a shotgun as a 9-year-old boy and died, and then had the visionary experience. It felt like he was in space, inside a bubble, and then he went on. Him and I are about the same age, and now, I mean, he's had a profound set of UFO experiences, and that guy is very psychic. And then what more than that, he's a powerful healer. Like he can do hands-on healing, like, I've got to be careful what I say, but like Christ consciousness kind of abilities. So and I know him well, and he does not exaggerate. So and I've heard other stories from other people around him and things like that. So I do not doubt. Yeah. So people ask me like, hey, Mike, can you write another book about owls and UFOs? Or can you write another book about owls? And, like, oh God, I sure could. But like, it would be just the same story. The stories have a flavor and mood. It would just be like, it would be like a rerun. And I have so many stories. I'll add some to this in a little bit. But I'm getting 1 or 2 good stories a day. And that's been consistent for about the last 15 years. Wow. I mean, good stories. And some people send me a story and it's like, oh, I saw an owl land in a branch and it was such a pretty sighting. It was really beautiful to see. And like, well, that's nice, but that's not like a top shelf story. There might be something more there, but they're not sharing it with me. But like, just like wild, mind-bending stories. Oh, in fact, there's one I wanted to send you. I'll get a hold of this fellow, and it just feels like something more from he's from England, so it has that. But I've got so many, but it wouldn't do any good to just publish another book because it would essentially be the same flavor of the story, it'd be a new singular story, but it would just mirror the stories that I've already talked about in like 100 times in the book. So what I figured is I would try to do a fiction story that had, and the term I'm using is flavor and mood. Like people contact me and say, here's my owl story. Have you ever heard this story before? And I'm like, no, but I've heard many, many with the same flavor and mood. Like I can almost, you must know this too, where someone tells you a story and you can just feel it. You can just say, oh, go, I get it. Like, yeah, like and like, I know where you're coming from. And so I kind of married a lot of stories that I'd collected, many of that I'd had myself, and then put them into this book. And the book plays out a little bit like I know it's kind of like dream language. If you read the reviews on Amazon, like when I wrote this thing, I was so nervous putting this thing out. I had a few people, Joshua Cutchin read the book before it was put out. He had some great feedback for me, and I tweaked and changed some things, and a handful of my close friends read it, and then I got some good feedback and just could kind of, oftentimes a few things were even just what was written on the back of the book, like make sure to say this on the back of the book, because if someone doesn't know what they're getting into, like it's like the book has got a kind of a dream logic narrative to it. But the book had the theme owls run through the story in the book, which is understandable because that's been the core of my research. And it has kind of a cliffhanger ending, which I was totally fine with. I grew up in the 70s, in a lot of the TV shows, in movies especially, you were like allowed to have like a kind of a haunted, open-ended, ambiguous ending to a movie or a book. I don't feel like you're allowed to do that anymore. I think people would be really dissatisfied and they'd complain. So I was like, what's my book? I can do whatever I want. So I gave it that kind of 70s style, open-ended, and I got a lot of feedback. People got back, I just read the last page. How dare you? And I was like, well, so I kind of was like, I didn't plan on making a sequel. And I kept some notes and I kept thinking and I kept kind of like, I just had like a little notebook and I was like, oh, I could put this in the sequel. Oh, if this happens. And then this story just emerged. And what happened was, I don't want to give too much away, but there's two characters in the main book. And, one character kind of drives the story and he meets this other character and there's some romance there. And then the second story seems to want to tell the other person's story. So the character in the first book was totally represented by the owl. And the story in the second book seems to want, like it feels like I got to kind of get out of the way and let the book write itself, which is, it's not as easy as you think, but the second character seems to want to be represented by a deer. Have you ever read a book called Cave and Cosmos by an author named Michael Harner?
No, I haven't.
He wrote a book called Way of the Shaman, which is considered a very important book in the shamanism studies. And I think he's died just in the last few years. And he was an anthropologist. And he kind of, what's the term? Like you go native, right? You kind of like study your tribe and then all of a sudden you're sucked in part of the tribe. So he was studying shamanism and essentially became a powerful shaman in his own right. And he did a lot of drumming. So he would just do a rhythmic drumming, boom, 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 boom. And he would work with people like a therapist almost, or in a group setting. And he had a protocol, which was basically just, I think it was essentially just relax and let go. And he would beat the drum and these people would spontaneously go into shamanic journeys. And the book Cave and Cosmos is just filled with those shamanic journeys. He would tell the shamanic journey and then the next person. And it's so interesting because I've immersed myself in UFO research. And then I read this book, Cave and Cosmos. And these shamanic journeys are not the same as a UFO abduction event. But there is something there. There's some flavor and mood that's similar. And I was just fascinated. But there were a few stories in that book that had to do with deer. And those kind of, I didn't plagiarize in any way, but I used those to form parts of the story. So the deer in association with the shaman, in association with like transformative events, really seem to be playing out in this part two that I'm writing and working on right now. And I'll also say that when I was nearing completion of the first book, I had a, can I just tell a story? I got a whopper of a deer story. I may have told you this before, and forgive me if I'm telling it again. So I'm living in the northwest of the United States, just outside of Seattle, and it's forested with the big trees in it. And I had just moved into a home here. I'm sharing the home. It's a great big giant house with this beautiful property. I'm really blessed to be living here. And so I'm driving, I'm like just a few hundred yards down the road here, and I turn the corner, and then this deer, boom, like hits the hood of the car, and kind of clanks on the hooves are clanking on the hood of the car. And I wasn't going very fast because I was in the midst of a hard turn, and it kind of trots off, and then I'm totally stopped, and this little itty bitty fawn crosses and follows, and I was like, I felt terrible. There's nothing I could do. The deer is trotted off into the bushes and it's gone, and I'm like, oh, I felt so bad. And I replayed it and replayed it and replayed it, and I wasn't careless in my driving. And so the next morning, I'm making coffee, big giant bay window in the kitchen, in a beautiful yard there with the big huge trees and all the greenery, and I'm making coffee, and this deer limps into view, and this adorable little fawn kind of bounces around with this mother. And I'm like, oh my God, that's the limping deer. I hit that deer. That's the deer I hit. So I'm trying to work on this novel, finish it up, finalize it, get it ready for publication. And that deer is there pretty much every morning for that summer. Like every morning the deer is there. And I'm like, so there it is, like limping. And I'm like, you could see it's in pain. And I got to remember the order of this. I'm friends with someone, I'm going to call her Margaret. That's not her real name. And it's someone who's contacted me, and we've been in touch for a long time. And this person has gone through a lot of issues and very troubled. And she was in college when we first connected. This would have been around 2009. And she was thinking about dropping out of college because she was having all kinds of emotional issues. And there was a lot of pressure from her parents to stay in college. And I had been working with youth, working for an outdoor school. And so I was working with college age students all the time. And I knew this pressure. Like students would tell me, like, I got so much pressure from my parents to do what they want me to do. And I want to lead my own life. And this is exactly what I did, right? So it took a lot of work to like be a professional illustrator. My parents did not want me to do that, So, and then to work for an outdoor school, they didn't want me to do that. But I felt really strongly that, so I felt like I could offer some advice to this young woman, and we remain friends and we talk often. And then, so I had a dream with this woman, and I met her once very briefly. I was driving across the country and just said hello to her in the town she was living in. And I had a dream where I was interacting with her, and all I said was, I'm sorry. It was my fault. I did this. It's my fault. And it was really a powerful dream. It was like really kind of like tears in my eyes waking up in the morning. It was really emotional. And it just went on and on and on. So now where I'm living now, I can walk to the water. Seattle is on this, Puget Sound, and there's all these inland waterways and all these islands, and it's really pretty. And so I can walk to the saltwater. So and then right across from me is what's called Bainbridge Island, and I can see a little bit of the suburbs of Seattle, depending on where I look. So I'm across the water from Seattle. It's a few miles away, and so to get there, I have to walk through this park, and this park has a baseball field in it. So to get to the park itself, where there's some trails and there's some old growth forest, and it goes along the water, but passing through the baseball fields. And this is Little League baseball, which is like totally the most Americana thing you can imagine. And they have, in the summer, in the evening, there's baseball games and kids and parents, and it's really sweet. So, but anyway, it was totally empty this afternoon. And I did this, and I was coming back from my walk, which I do almost every day. And there's this corridor where the big tall fence of the outfield of the baseball diamond is on one side, and this big tall wall of blackberry bushes, which are dense here, the thorns, and they're just dense. And so there's this thin little corridor, so you can actually kind of put your hands out and touch the fence with one hand and touch the blackberries with the other. So I'm walking down this corridor, and it kind of turns because the outfield is kind of curved. And so I get in this corridor, and there in front of me is the limping deer. This is the summer that I hit it. And with the fawn. And the fawn is just bouncing around, like just has this electricity and life that, I mean, you've seen fawns. They have a life that's undeniable. So this was the morning I woke up, and it was this afternoon, the same afternoon after having the dream where I talked to this woman, Margaret. Mm. And I see the deer, and I go, it's my fault. I'm sorry. I did this. I did this to you. I did it. And I'm almost going to tear up here a little bit. And so there was nowhere to go, right? So I'm in this corridor, so I'd stand there, and the deer would just stand there in front of me. And I was kind of seeing its you could see its back hips were crooked, and I was just like, and it would take a step, and you could see it was in pain. It was like soul crushing. And I was like, I did this. I did this. It's my fault. I am so sorry. I didn't have to raise my voice. The deer was right there. So I would take a step, and this deer would limp and take a step. And I would take another step, and the deer would limp. And so I made almost no progress. And the entire time I was apologizing and asking forgiveness from this deer. And there came a point when the fence curved and it opened up, and the deer could walk off, and I could kind of give it its own space. That I don't know that might not seem like much. I mean, I was crying. Yeah, I was crying and talking to this deer. There's a dream involved too. So there's this kind of like unconscious emotional power to this. So, and I've been working on the book, and that I used that. It's right in the book. Essentially, so much of that, what I just played out, which was a real life experience with a dream, a real life dream, so dream element, and it swirled around a little bit, but I merged all those elements and just retold that story in the project I'm working on now. So that owl energy has a totally different kind of mythic symbolism, let's say, than the deer energy. So the owl feels like it is a stern teacher, and the deer feels like it's a gentle teacher, if that makes sense. Yes. The owl is a predator, and the deer is a prey, essentially. So you have two different teachers coming from those two different viewpoints. And also the mythic, the owl has the goddess of wisdom connected to it, and then the deer has the goddess of the forest connected to it. So I held the floor for a long time, forgive me, but yeah.
No, not at all. It's a very moving story. Thank you for sharing that. Yes. What happened afterwards? Did you ever see the deer again? Did it just go?
You know what? The next spring, my roommate here said, Mike, come downstairs, look at the lawn. You got to come out. And it was the limping deer. And the fawn was now a yearling and had little fuzz on little tiny baby antlers. And then the limping deer was barely limping at all.
Oh, that's
so it was like, oh my word. I went out there with my camera and I took pictures, and I was like, oh, it was really a relief. So that was after the winter. And winters are pretty mild here, but I just wondered if like, wow, did that deer make it through the winter? And they both did. So they were both back in the yard. It was obviously the same deer. There was a scar on the hind leg that I could definitely ID.
I'm so pleased to hear that. You
Yeah.
sent me a picture recently. Was it that picture of the deer with the little fawn?
No, we have deer all over the place here. So, but that was a perfect picture. I came around a corner and that picture, there was like a trail. That's right where the water is, where I was describing you could see the water in the background there. And but it was just there's a wonderful trail through the woods, and I came around a corner. It made this really straight shot down to the water, and this little fawn, it had the most adorable, like a full body expression, like, what are you? Like as I was walking towards it, and I took some pictures from far away, and the zoomed in one is a little blurry consequently, but and then as I got closer, there was a doe with another fawn. So there were two fawns and one mother there, and they just walked into the woods. I didn't stress them out at all. So that was a wonderful, lovely sighting. But we had talked about this a little bit, and that was, you had mentioned something like, oh, what about the deer stuff? And I'm like, I get this deer stuff sometimes. And then that same afternoon, I had this perfectly cinematic moment with a baby deer.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's how it goes, isn't it? I mean, a couple of things to mention there is that so these kind of premonition dreams where so you have a dream, and in the dream it can be something like that, where you either see something or you say something and you find yourself, I tend to notice it's usually the same morning for some reason. It's usually
Mm-hmm.
the morning rather than even the afternoon. You will have an interaction that happened in your dream. And in the dream, it didn't make sense. And then it plays out that morning. And it's always completely random. Do you get those? I've been getting them more in the last couple of years than I had in my previous life.
A little bit. That was a pretty heavy-handed example of it. So I think I almost don't like my real life experiences can be so strong, and then my my dream life is kind of comes and goes. Like I kind of sometimes remember my dreams and sometimes don't. And if I do, I keep a dream journal and such. But and it's funny. I look back at the dream journal and you've like a dream from 2 years ago. I don't remember the dream at all, and then I read my own dream and I'm like, well, that's pretty good. Yeah, that's pretty. There's some, but I certainly have had some powerful dream experiences that play out. Yeah.
And that aside, yeah, there is really something about the deer, and it seems to be that they are coming into our consciousness more for whatever reason. I don't know what that reason is, but I'm hearing, I know for myself, I had a deer experience, which I'll share in a moment. And it changed my life. My life has been different since then. And so it's quite a profound experience for me, a very powerful, very unusual, very clear. But I've also heard from other people. I was listening to Miguel Connor. We were talking
Hmm.
recently, weren't we, about I mentioned this to you that on an Aeon Bite he had, I can't remember which context it was in now. I'd had sent you the episode and perhaps should have listened to it again before we spoke today. But at the time he on the show had said he felt that Artemis was in the sphere, that people are feeling called by Artemis. And I relate Artemis to deer for obvious reasons. And my experience was this in Beltane 2023. I was due to meet a bunch of folks that had come over from Jersey, my friends, and they were going to be somewhere down. Initially we were going to meet at Stonehenge. I knew they were doing a tour. Anyway, the night before, at about 11 o'clock, I got a strong message, and you know when they come, a strong message to go and get a bath. It was very late at night, later than I'd usually take a bath, but I heard it, and I say I heard it, I received it. It's a
Hmm.
voice booming in my head, but I received this. I need to take a bath. Okay, yeah, I get the quality that this is something I need to do. So I did. I mean, after I had a bath, I again received that I needed to paint my toenails red. I would paint my toenails red anyway, but I needed to paint my toenails. And it kind of felt like a ritualistic thing. There was something about it. And again, so it was very, very late at night. I did this because it felt right. Now, I didn't know what the plans were for the next day. Okay. But in the morning, when I woke up, I knew that I had to get to West Kennet chamber. Okay. Dolmen.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd never been before. Now, as I said, I knew that my friends were going to be doing a tour of some sacred sites. But I knew that no, wherever they were going to be, whatever they were going to be doing, I knew I had to get in the car and drive to West Kennet. So my husband and I take care of our little girl on a Saturday. And so when it came to lunchtime and I had my afternoon, I took the car and I did just that. And I kind of overshot West Kennet and ended up going up some back roads. And two farmer guys told me I was going to be going, if I stayed where I was going to get locked in by a gate. And they told me that in order to get to where I wanted to go, where to park. Now, I didn't realize that there was a car park that most sensible people park in. Then they cross the road and then they walk up the.
I know it well. I've been there a few times.
Okay. So being a sort of not so sensible person, I had ended up in a car park at the base, but to the right, if you're looking down from West Kennet, to the right. And so I entered the hill, the sacred site, from the side and proceeded to walk up the hill. Now, as soon as I had got to the bottom of the hill, another very strong message was I need to take my shoes off. And so I did so, and I began to walk up the hill. And when I got to the West Kennet, the chamber, there were, I mean, it was really busy. It was a Saturday afternoon, tons of people there. I went in, I meditated. While I was in there, I was in there for the whole afternoon.
The whole afternoon. Inside the chamber. The last chamber?
So the big chamber to begin with. I was in there and eventually it got quieter. And there were times when I was the only one in there, which was great. But I had this really strong sensation of antlers growing from my head.
Mm.
And I can't tell you how striking that was. It was really, it felt just incredible. But I'm in this meditation. So at the time I'm kind of just in it. It's afterwards when you look back and, and I was asking, I can't actually remember now what it was that I was asking, but I was in some kind of communication. And in response, I was receiving cold drips of water on specific parts of my body. And they felt like they were an answer to what I was asking. Okay. And at one point, and this really made sense at the time, this one drop fell right in the center of the crown on my head. So this water has come through the stones. It wasn't raining or anything. It was really warm outside. But, it's come through the stones and it's landing on my body. And then I had an experience of the antlers again. I'm getting cold even just talking about it. And I then moved into a chamber, which was the second chamber on the left as you walk in.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat on a low stone that was on the floor. It was like a flat stone on the floor. So I sat there and it was very dark in there. So some people might come in and they wouldn't even know I was there. And once or twice somebody went to walk in the chamber, then saw I was there and kind of I'd given them a bit of a fright. But when there was nobody in there, I was able to, it was a very kind of intuitive thing. I began to chant whatever was coming through, and I can't even remember what it was, or even if it actually made sense. I've got a feeling it was words though. I began to chant. I had my eyes closed, went into a deep meditation with this chant. And when I opened my eyes, there was an orange orb. It was about this size, so quite small. And it was just to the level, just around the level of kind of my hairline, I guess, to my left. And it was quite near me. And I mean, I have had experiences in my life, and in Jersey, I would hang out at Dolmens a lot and meditate. But I haven't had such a strong presence making itself known. Okay. And it was pretty mind-blowing for me. So I then 2 days later, I drove to meet my friends in Glastonbury because I hadn't caught up with them that day. On the way to Glastonbury, I'm driving up a hill, which is kind of like the main back road from Bristol, where I live, to Glastonbury. And you go up this really steep hill, which I can't remember the name of at the moment, but it's very, very steep. And as I reached the brow of the hill, a deer came out from the left hedgerow, high hedgerow, into the road, trotted in front of my car, looking at me, and then trotted off up to the next hedgerow and went off. And that's a really busy road, although it's a back road. It's a really busy road because it's a real thoroughfare from Bristol to Glastonbury. And just the fact that it jumped in front of my car, and I was on my way to a Beltane procession in Glastonbury. That's why I was going there, to meet my friends for this Beltane procession. And, ever since that time, I have been working with Artemis, because I forgot to say that in the chamber, I received some words very clearly. And I did talk about this. I kind of made a little video and I put it on Patreon, and I didn't mind kind of sharing with people that kind of get this kind of thing, but I'm not going to say the words now. But the message was very, very distinctly about Artemis. And so I started to look into this, and a friend, and she said, well, it's interesting because West Kennet, there was some kind of group potentially she said she didn't know if there was some history surrounding it with somebody seeing a being in there with an antler headdress, or whether people were doing work in there wearing an antler headdress. She wasn't sure. And actually, I've never got to the bottom of that, I have to say. But whatever it was, the message was really clear for me. It was about Artemis. And so I have been working with Artemis ever since. And since then, I've spoken with other people. In fact, Amanda Radcliffe was somebody told about this at the time, what had happened. And she said to me, in fact, she had written the most beautiful, I guess it's like a poem, really, that I added to that Patreon.
Amanda wrote it.
Amanda had written this absolutely beautiful post, and it was, I'd included it in my post with her permission. She had gone into a deep trance with when she was living in France. She had this vision of a very ancient tribe of people who were not just worshipping the deer. It was that the deer was guiding them, and that these people, they were the tribe of the deer, and that's not the words that she used, but it was to do with shamanism. And the more I've kind of looked into it, the more this really makes sense to me. I call upon Artemis whenever I'm giving healing appointments now. That's something I do every time. I call upon her for guidance. And so, to hear that you also have had fairly recent experiences with the deer as well, and other people that I've spoken to, that it seems to be there's something quite profound happening, and I can't help but feel that it's a feminine energy too. I can't help but feel that it's this this feminine guidance. And yes, it is kind of gentle compared to the owl, which you really look up to the owl. I mean, we do, don't we? We look up to the owl. But there's something that's extremely powerful and unmistakable with the deer. And it's very, it directs you, but not in the same way as the owl. It directs you something about stepping into your own path. I feel it's something about that. So that's what I have to offer around the deer.
And wow, okay. There's a lot I could say here. As far as the owl, what I've found is people ask me all the time, like, is the owl bad? Right? So people like, I mean, the UFO contact experiences, like, I mean, there's some creepy, scary stories connected to it, and you can extrapolate in all kinds of directions, and it can get scary and dark fast. So if like, or you can let it get scary and dark. What I'm finding is I'm not truly researching the UFO lore. I'm researching the owl and its connection to the UFO lore. And and what I've found is that the owl seems to be like, it's a tough totem. It's not a fluffy, light totem. And here I'll tell one story, and I may have told this on to before, but forgive me if I have. This is a good example of, so a woman was living in on the West Coast here, and had a dog, and she would walk her dog. Now, this woman had had a lot of what we would call UFO contact experiences, and she had been going to like support groups and working with therapists, she was living in a place of terrible fear, really crippling, had a really bad influence on her life, the UFO stuff. So it's pouring down rain, and her dog wants to go for a walk. So she gets her dog. It's a German Shepherd. It's a big German Shepherd. And where she was living, there's a long jetty that goes out into the salt water. And it's like around here with the inland waterways and stuff like that. But this long jetty goes out into the salt water, and it's pouring down rain. And she's walking the dog, and she gets about half, and she walks the dog all the time on this jetty. And she gets about halfway out, and she's like, what am I doing? Why am I out here? Why? I would never, it's like, I wouldn't come out. Why? I shouldn't be out here in the rain. I never walk the dog when it's raining this hard. And she turns around with the dog, and there's a great big owl standing facing her. So she's facing the owl, it's facing her, and her dog sits down, and she says that it was very unusual. That was very unusual, because the dog is usually high strung and would have wanted to bark and chase this thing, but the dog just sat down, and she said that like it was in the presence of royalty. And eventually the owl flies off, and she goes back home, and shortly thereafter, she had a pain in her arm, and she went to the doctor, and she was dealing with some issues, and she was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And she chose to go through traditional chemotherapy, and she said she went right to the edge of death. The chemotherapy was brutal. She went right to the edge of death. And she told me the story, and I was like, do you think the owl like what role did the owl play? Like, I almost wondered if the owl healed you or allowed you to heal. And I asked it like that, did the owl like help you heal? And she said, no. The owl was there to tell me, your life is about to change. Get ready. Your old life is about to end. This new life is about to begin. And I said, okay, how's your life changed? And she said, before the cancer, before everything I went through, I was afraid of my own shadow. I was living in a place of fear. And now I am afraid of nothing. And to me, I mean, that would be symbolic of the owl. The owl presents someone with a real challenge. And I will say that what I talked about, like, oh my God, I was going through all this stuff where I had to confront my own, like I was in denial. I had to confront my own experiences. I had to face these things. I didn't want to. I fought, and fighting it just proved terrible. It just was horrible for my mental health and my well-being and my sense of self. And all of that was triggered in 2006 by a camping trip where I saw these owls. That's the story I tell with this woman, Kristen. So and that was the first blog post. Actually, it was the second blog post on my site, was when I saw these owls in the woods with Kristen. It's not much of a story. I went in the woods and I saw some owls, but it had such a powerful effect on my life. And it sent me down this path of looking into both the UFO contact experience when I looked at these owls, in my mind, I heard a voice that said, this has something to do with the UFOs. And I saw, and so there's no UFO in the story except for the voice in my head. So, and I did look into this UFO thing, and I also looked into the mythology of owls, and right from the beginning, they blurred together. So it was like, they turned into one thing for me, which they aren't one thing. They're two different things, but I kind of just, my own obsessive nature, like it took over my life. But like this woman saw this owl, survived brutal cancer treatment, and has been cancer free now for 20 years. I just interacted with her recently. She sounds great. There's a lot more to her story. Like, wow, if I told it all, and how it ties into so much other stuff. It's typical of all these stories. You pull on one little thread and the sweater just totally unravels, and you're left with this like chaotic mess. It's hard to tell a story because it tends not to have a beginning, middle, and end. It has just all these disparate, synchronistic, paranormal, unknowable moments, but they all sort of coalesce into this overall mood. Now, so I would say that I had a similar experience to that woman. I was confronted with these owls. I basically went crazy for a couple of years, and then organized that chaotic mind, mess into these books on owls and UFOs, and eventually owls, and more just, let's say, owls and the transformative experience. I guess that would be, there's, with the novel, I never use the word, it is a story about owls and UFOs, but I purposely never use the word UFO once in the story. And there's only one point in the story where there's just a little dot in the sky. And that's it. I wanted to underplay it. I wanted people to pick up that book and not even know it was about UFOs. And I never use the word synchronicity in the book. I don't think I use the word coincidence, but they're threaded all throughout it. And I did that on purpose to sort of, it would have been too easy just to simply, to put a UFO on the cover and, but I fought that, and I wanted to tell a deeper story. And there's actually, I don't want to give too much away, but it's a goddess story, the unseen. And if I did my job right, like nobody quite catches that. And I just am so proud of myself that like, oh, I snuck that one in there. No one really caught that. So, but I tried to hide the subtext of the story as an apotheosis story of a goddess. So, and that really comes to the forefront in book 2.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because you said that the idea for around the deer came from kind of book 1. Do you think that was tied into the goddess? Was that?
Oh yeah. It was right at the forefront of my writing. I had like, okay, I'm gonna write this story, but like basically thumbtacked to the wall in front of my writing desk was, this is a goddess story. Like it's an emergence of the emergence of the goddess, and I hit it as best I could. But I wanted people to feel that and not know it.
Yeah.
So.
Wow, I really look forward to reading that, and that those words really strike me. The emergence of the goddess, and I'm thinking back to the experience that you had with the limping deer. How did that feel as well? Did you have a sense of that with?
Oh, it was titanic. It was enormous when it was happening. It was like full body purging of grief and guilt and just apologizing to the universe. Now, so here's something that I didn't say. So this woman, Margaret, I was in England in 2014, and I was at the British Museum, and there was a book. There's a little, or it was near the British Museum. There's a little bookstore. It was a great little bookstore and a coffee shop, and I bought a tiny little book, and I'll be able to look up the author's name, but it's simply called Deer. and it's from an English publisher, and it is a color little book, and it's all about the mythology of the deer and how the deer has been ever present in our society as it's our food source in most societies, historically, all across the world, and how mythologies arose from that. And so it's a lovely little book. It's got wonderful pictures and a lot of ancient old pictures of druid poet or druid pottery and such. So, but I sent that book to Margaret because she has always identified so heavily with the deer. And it's funny because people say like, Mike, because so in the UFO lore, there's what's called a screen memory,
Yes.
where people will see a 4-foot tall owl on the side of the road, and then they'll have a missing time event, and it'll tie back into what might be a UFO contact event. So that owls are commonly reported, but also deer are commonly reported. So owls and deer are by far, I've talked to a lot of UFO abduction researchers, owls and deer are like even Steven on this top shelf. But below that are all kinds of other things, raccoons and cats and squirrels and clowns and firemen and Jesus and family members. There's other things that show up as screen memory too. But owl and deer are at the top of this screen memory. And this is funny because I've talked to the UFO abduction researchers and I say, why do you think it's owl and deer? Or why do you think it's owl is the first question. And they'll say, well, the owl kind of looks like one of those gray aliens, right? They got the big black eyes and they're kind of, I'm like, well, a little bit. Like they don't really look like a gray alien. And then what about the deer? Well, the deer doesn't look like a deer. They got those big eyes. And it's like, well, a lot of animals. It's two nocturnal animals in a sense that have. And so I would argue that the owl and deer are two powerful archetypes with powerful symbolic folklore all throughout the world, the owl and the deer. So I would argue that these beings, these aliens, they know the core hidden archetype. Like those archetypes rest within our subconscious. Like anyone understands in their bones that there's something deeper to an owl than just a bird with big eyes that flies in the forest. You see one in real life, you can feel it. And I'm not saying that for myself, I'm saying it from all the letters I've gotten. Even the people who see the owl on the branch in their backyard say, wow, did that thing have a majesty to it? Wow. Then what they say is, I was honored to be in the presence of this bird. Nobody says that about nobody says that about a crow, or a sparrow. But an owl has this huge presence. And then it's the same for a deer. There's a deer in the park over there, and I just see pictures. I see people taking pictures of the deer in the park. They're not that exceptional of an animal when you get right down to it, but they have that magic presence, and I think we all can tap into it. So there's like an archetypal power with both the owl and the deer that's parallel in the UFO abduction lore as well as our human folklore, and I cannot see that as accidental. The UFO researchers don't want anything to do with my kind of loopy, kind of earth-based, logic, but they want to treat it as something more Freudian, and I want to treat it as something more Jungian, I guess.
No, you're onto something. I did not know that deer came up as so regularly as a screen memory.
All the time.
Mike, where is it? I just on deer research and the mythology around the deer, I have to mention Caroline Wise, because I think I mentioned this book to you recently. She had written this book, Finding Ellen.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. The Quest for Ellen of the Ways. She worked with Andrew Collins, actually. I'll put a link below to a brilliant interview that she did, a presentation she did, and she talks about how her findings came about. And funnily enough, I have to say, both you and I came into contact with deer on the road. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, my profound experience in West Kennet, but when we saw the deer, it was on the road, wasn't it? And Ellen of the Ways, she was a goddess of the roads, the ancient roads. So just noting that at this point, um, that I'm going to speak to Caroline. She's going to come on and
Oh, wonderful.
yeah, and have a chat with me. But I took some notes earlier, but she was talking about, because when she first started looking into it, she was thinking about, well, why would a female deer have antlers? But of course, it's the reindeer, so female reindeers have antlers.
Mm-hmm.
And she was talking about, of course, how they are connected with the shaman, the ancient communities and the shaman, in terms of how the reindeer would be tied up and eat the what's it called?
Animascaria, the mushroom.
Muscaria, yeah. Amanita muscaria. And of course, then the shamans would drink the urine, as many of us know, and that would neutralize the toxins within the mushroom so that it was safe for the shamans to then use that for altered, states. And so she was looking into all of this, and she did find a lot of evidence showing that this deer goddess was the word Ellen talks about Ellen of the Ways. The word Ellen actually means deer in lots of different languages, including Lithuanian, Croatian, Serbian, Polish, Macedonian, and Bulgarian. The name Ellen is actually, yeah. And so she said, this is more about, rather than the name Ellen, it's more about the deer goddess. Anyway, I'm not going to go too much more into her research here because it'd be lovely to hear from her, of course. But when I heard you speak on Edgeways and you were talking about deer, for me, it was just another indication that this archetype is making itself known at this time. And I think it's kind of re-entering, we're going into the age of Aquarius. And for a lot of people, that means a return to the feminine. We're moving out of the patriarchal 2000 years we've been in the Piscean age, where there's just been one God and, all of these ways of being. And we are opening up once more again, to the goddess and to the divine in our own way. Feels
Well, that Chris Bledsoe talks about that in his direct experience, where the Shining Lady story. Have you the Shining Lady story that he has?
I was aware that, yeah, I didn't know it's called the Shining Lady. Yeah.
Well, or the Lady in White sometimes, but he calls it the Shining Lady. So he had an experience. Here, I'll tell this. This is a power. There's no UFO in it, but it's like it's the kind of experience that I don't know, like religions would be built on in some ways. So he's in his backyard. I've been to his house in his backyard. He's since moved to a different place. So, this is not in farmland or anything like that. This is on the suburbs. It's wooded and such like that. So he's in his backyard. Oh, I think he was in his house and he got a message. It's middle of the night. Go in the backyard. Get up, get out, go in the backyard. So he gets up and puts his shoes on and walks in the backyard. And there's a bull in his backyard, a bull. I mean, big giant bull standing in his backyard. So he's standing and I stood right there with him. And he said, I was standing here and that bull was right there. And this thing charged me. And then he backed up and it went right over him and it trampled him. Now I'm not so he's told the story many times and I've heard him, but in his direct experience, he was like, I'm dead. That's what he told me. He hints at that. He said, I felt like this thing ran right over me and it trampled me. And he realized that as it ran up over me, I could look through it and see the stars in the sky. And then it passed over him. He showed me he was on the ground. He was like, I was right here on the ground. And I turned around and where the bull should have been was this woman floating about 3 feet off the ground in a white gown and she was kind of in this. Do you know what the term orant pose is?
No.
It's a pose with your palms out. So when a Mary is portrayed in paintings and such, she has her palms out, either like this or like this. Okay, you can't see the camera, but I would have to have my either like this down or like this out. So she has her palms out. That's called the orant pose, and it's a archetypal pose that shows up in ancient paintings and sculptures and folklore. I mean, if it's Jesus is sometimes shown with his palms up like that or palms out like this. And there she was in the orant pose. And so he like, and he was given a message, and he's interacted. He calls this, and he is very expressive when he talks. He's like, this was the most beautiful, powerful visual experience of my life. The beauty and the radiance of this glowing lady in this white robe with her blonde hair, and she just emanated this power. And then since then I've like he was very, very, he didn't say what the message was, and he's had some interactions in that. If I want to be really careful, because I'm saying this from memory, but we just switched. But he says that the message was the return of the goddess. We're entering an age where there will be a return of the goddess. And so, I mean, the bull, talk about an archetypal image. That's like an ancient archetypal image, right? So the bull kills him metaphorically. So, so he dies metaphorically. He says it like, I thought I was dead, and then he's confronted with this equally archetypal image of the goddess. I mean, he's very Christian, so he just says it was this lady in a white dress that emanated love, but if you, I mean, there's a painting that an artist did of this image, and here I'll tell you this. There are very few people, I could count them on one hand, and I'm one of them, who've had an incredible array of owl stories. And Chris Bledsoe is at the top of that list. He has had more powerful owl experiences than anyone I've ever met. They are remarkable, and and these are real owls, like seeing real owls in his yard and stuff like that. It's his kids and his family. So that all gets blurred together, these powerful archetypal images, the bull, the goddess, the owl, it's all interwoven into this story.
Amazing. That's really amazing. I mean, I have followed his work online, but I hadn't delved into, a lot of the backstory. I'd had listened to one or two interviews with him, but I will dive in deeper, because I know, again, Amanda, our mutual friend, she was very much, supportive of his, not just his work, but she, I guess a lot of their experiences align, in the way that she has interactions with Lady, of course. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot we could get into there, and I feel, I guess there's this other indication of us going into the goddess age, and for you, maybe, meeting this deer and having this experience with them. Do you think there's something there around the patriarchy giving way to the feminine in your interaction with her, as if like you could take on,
Wow, that's a tough one to know the deeper meaning. So all I can say is that it had an incredible emotional power, and it was, and it like I did not know I would do it at the time. So it happened a few summers ago, and maybe 2 summers ago, 2 or 3 summers ago. It was right around, maybe 3 summers ago, and what it has done, it has kind of reverberated around in my brain as I'm trying to go through the creative process of birthing another novel or part two to a story that I was like, okay, one and done. I don't even, it's like, I'm going to give it a kind of a cliffhanger ending and that's it. And then readers were like, no, 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 I want to find out what happens next. And I was like, I never planned to have a next. So the story started emerging and it was intertwined with that emotional power of that deer, that the limping deer that I hit and the little fawn, both of them on the, yeah. So I mean, the story's, still in a genesis process. I mean, I've written big chunks of it, but it has not completed yet. Do you remember, should I tell how I met Amanda Rathcliffe?
Oh, yes.
Do you remember the story?
I think, was it?
Okay, this is a good one. You'll like this one. So I think I told you, and I've told her. So you interviewed Amanda, and she was talking about the Lady in White experiences she had, right? So this was going back maybe a couple summers ago that I was listening to it, and I have earbuds, and I have a iPhone, and I have this. I live in a place with these beautiful trails, and then there's this one spot. It's just it's just this huge collection of these web of trails, and you can get lost, and it's just a great place to go for a walk. So it's pretty close to me here, and I go there all the time. And what I do is it's the Northwest, it's Seattle area, so the coffee's really, really good here. So there's a little coffee hut, so I get a cup of coffee, and then I walk really, really fast, and I take notes about like the book projects. And I do my best thinking on this trail. So I'm listening to you talk with Amanda, and she's talking about the Shining Lady. And I'm like, oh, I got to get a hold of this lady because she needs to meet Chris Bledsoe. This lady needs to meet Chris Bledsoe. And I'm walking and walking and walking. And I'm like, she tells another story. And I'm like, wow, she really needs to talk to Chris Bledsoe. And then all of a sudden she says, both of you, this was a great interview. Both of you have these really soft English accents, and it was really engaging for me to listen to as an American. And then she says, oh, and then I met Diana Pasulka, Dr. Diana Pasulka. And right away, I knew that if she met Diana Pasulka, then she met Chris Bledsoe. So I knew, boom, like she knows Chris Bledsoe. Later, she says she met him, but right at that moment, she says, and I just knew, like, oh, she already knows. And at that point, I turn a corner on the trail and walking, it's notice I'm raising my hand. And then walking towards me on the trail is a fairy. And it was a woman dressed in a fairy costume walking on the trail. Like walking, like and it happened simultaneously with Amanda Rathcliffe saying, I met Dr. Diana Pasulka. Instantly, I knew she knows Chris Bledsoe. Boom. It was like, boom, boom, boom. This happened instantly. And this lady, there's so many synchronicities tied into this. So this lady kind of walked, we had to pass each other on the trail. And she, I've lived in New York City. She gave me she's in her funny fairy outfit. And this was not this was not from the set of Lord of the Rings. This was like a kind of a, little kid's Halloween costume with like ugly plasticky kind of fairy wings and kind of a little fairy kind of Peter Pan-y outfit on with bright colors and stuff. And it was real plasticky. And I had to pass her. And so I lived in New York City, and there's like this look that people can give in New York City where it's like, you're not talking to me. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to, I really wanted to say, you have no idea how fun it is that you're in a fairy costume right now. And I'm talking to, I'm listening to the Fairy Stories Network podcast right now and so I pass her and I look behind me a little bit, and this is a long straightaway. So I should have been able to see her for a while. And then I walked a little farther and I looked back and she was gone. She certainly could have just taken a little trail or a little fork in a trail or something like that. But it was odd that she was gone. She had this really striking face, and this, like the fairies, and like when the casting director picked the fairies for Lord of the Rings, you can tell the kind of people they were looking for, the high cheekbones and just a little bit of kind of, there's like their eyes tipped up a little bit. And she had that look, totally had that look. And she looked like this is someone I went to junior high school with. And I thought, she looks like this woman, Leah. It would have been a girl at the time. I would have been like 13 years old, but she looked like this woman, Leah. Now, it took me a little while to unravel this. This goes on a little bit. So eventually, then I contacted you, and then I said, hey, I had this powerful experience where I was listening to Amanda Rathcliffe, and then I bumped into a fairy on the trail. And then you reached out to Amanda Rathcliffe and you sent her a text as she was unpacking. She was moving to, I think she was moving to Glastonbury, and she was unpacking and she had just opened up a, like taken it out of the wrapping for travel or for moving, a framed image of an owl. At the moment that you said, "Oh, Mike Clelland wants to get a hold of you." And then so I got a hold of her and we went through some marathon. We talked, well, there was a couple days where we just like talked for a bunch of hours. And now this woman, I got a story that I got a few years ago, and I have permission to tell this story. There was a woman, and her name is Leah, and I don't want to say where she lives. But she lives out in the country, and she had a metal roof, and she woke up in the middle of the night and there was noise on the roof, clank, clank, clank. And she said, "Oh, there were owls on the roof." And then I was like, "Oh, what are these owls doing on the roof?" And then all of a sudden, whoosh, there's like this there's a lady in white, like hovering at the foot of her bed. And she describes it, and then whoosh, she's like taken out of the house, and she's floating above the earth, and she's looking down at the earth, and there's these like tendrils of like energy like swirling around the earth, like kind of radioactive kind of aurora borealis energy around the earth. And this lady, this glowing lady in the white robe says, I'm paraphrasing from memory, she says, "You're not allowed to leave. You're trapped here on purpose. We can't let you leave. Basically, we can't let you leave Earth." Kind of like, and then poof, she's back in bed and the lady's gone. And I said, "Did you ever see the owls on the roof?" She's like, "Oh no, I never saw anything." "Well, how did you know they were owls? It could have been anything." And she said, "I had a strong knowing they were owls." So she didn't see owls, but this is an owl story. And then I sent her, so Chris Bledsoe had a painting done of this shining lady. And I sent that to this woman, Leah. And then Leah said, "Oh my gosh, my heart stopped when I almost fell to the floor when I opened your email and opened this image. This is exactly what I saw." And that's who it looked like. It looked like this woman, Leah, this 12-year-old person. I haven't seen this woman, Leah, in 40 plus years. So, and that's the same name. So, I mean, it just like the knots just get so tangled so tightly here. And I don't know what to make of it. But like I've given up trying to solve the stories and just recognizing that there's a power to these stories, and I almost want to say like an archetypal power. Like these stories touch you at a subconscious level, and that's what they're meant to do. Like a poem is not meant to be understood logically. It's meant to be understood emotionally or subconsciously or intuitively. And so I'm just trying to let go and to let these stories touch me on that level and not over intellectualize them. And at the same time, with the fiction, well, I'm doing it in the nonfiction too, where I share these stories. I try to, I editorialize on what like an owl story might mean, but I try to do it as little as possible. But on an intuitive level or an unconscious level, I'm trying to let that unconscious story emerge in the fiction without, I mean, it's, which is tough because it's gotta fit in the flow of the story. And I've been trying, and that's what I said earlier, like that story of the deer in the corridor, where I'm trapped in the corridor with the deer, and the deer can't get out. I can't get out. I guess I could have walked. I would have ended up walking, add an extra half a mile to my walk, but I could have left the deer alone, but I didn't. And so that story of apologizing to the deer, I don't know what that means intellectually. I sure know how it makes me feel, but I don't know what it means. And I don't care what it means, but I do care deeply about how it made me feel. And so I wanted to make sure that got into the story. And that, as the further along I get in this research, the more that has become a sort of mission statement or a sort of guiding force to just not be trapped by my intellect and just to allow the deeper story to emerge.
Yeah, it sounds like this book is emerging, as you say. And I really resonate with what you were saying about needing to step out of the way in order for this to come through. And I'm totally with you there with not being able to know what any of this means. For me, it's just a feeling that there's a sense that when you are being called to something.
Mm.
It might be a book, or it might be to work in a certain way with a certain, being or deity or goddess, but you never really can know why you have that calling, but it's definitely a calling. And so, things reveal as you go along, a little like you were saying at the beginning, where you step into, I guess you're stepping into the abyss. You don't really know
Mm.
where it's leading, but that's the point. And that's the opposite way to the way that we tend to live our lives, or at least that we're told to live our lives. But the magic happens when you do step into wherever and whatever is calling you. Even when, as you say at the beginning, your friends around you are just saying, what are you doing? What is this about? Or your publisher or your editor is saying, well, how is this gonna, I think that's writing a book, the way that we're taught to write books, or the way that we're expected to write books, I should say, for our publishers. It's more about kind of showing the structure, showing where it's going to go. And it's, I can say, writing my book, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that I'm kind of, I'm not leading the way here. So it's very difficult to kind of get that across in this world, because they're just kind of the sort of material realm expectations, and then there's the real truth of the experience of whatever it is that's happening. And often you can't explain to people around you. And I think that's hard. That's hard for folks. I'm sure people that have written to you have had these profound experiences, and yet the people in their family or their friend group may just not understand that at all. And so you can be alone with this. And I think, but you've just got to trust it, haven't you? I think for me, is the sense that actually there's such a strength of a pull there, and it's not just a pull, but it's an aliveness. It's like that's where there's an aliveness in it, that you can't mistake.
Mm.
You're going into that sense of opening with it.
Yeah. Yeah, the flavor and mood of a story, just I can feel it. I can just feel it. And I'm just reading these stories often, and I can just feel the power of some of these stories. And when people reach out to me, they'll say things like, "Oh, I've never told my wife this. I've never told my boss this. Nobody knows this. You're the first person I'm telling it to," or one of the first. They basically have been hiding this for the most part. And then they'll tell a story, and they'll say, "Have you ever heard this before?" And I'm like, all the time, every day. I mean, I don't know how many messages or letters you're getting, but you must have a steady flow of people who are telling you stories. And I just say it over and over again because I've typed it so many times. There's a flavor and mood to these stories that is undeniable to me. And 95% of what people need to hear is you're not alone. Other people have had this, almost word for word of what you just described. And you can just feel, I've talked to people on the phone, you can just feel people like, oh, thank God I'm not alone. Like, really? I am? This is like, and if we turn the clock back, or like if we were living in a different era where if someone had a powerful, so you had an experience where you felt like you had grown antlers, you heard a voice in your mind, and you had a drop of water on your crown chakra, and you saw a little orange orb, right? So if you had that experience in Ireland 700 years ago, you could talk to the the lady at the edge of the village, and she would say, no big deal. Like, we all, like, this is part of it. This is part of what it means to be a member of this village or this community, or of being human, or of our path. And we don't have that now. We have podcasters who get letters and kind of have to wing it. Like, I'm not a shaman. I don't have any, but I'm like, I got to put my shaman hat on and do the best I can every once in a while, and like try to talk people down, or that's the wrong way to say it, or just try to talk people, just try to express to people that they're not alone. So this is a very simple one. So here's the questions I ask people. I say, what was going on leading up to the event? What changed after the event? How would you rate your psychic abilities? Do you have any healing abilities? That's all I care about. I mean, I could ask 100 questions, what day it was there an airport nearby that could have gotten a radar reading? I don't care about any of that stuff. So, and the stories I'm getting are mostly owl and UFOs, but I'm not even locked into the owl and UFO thing. I just want like a powerful owl story. It might have something to do with death, or some mystical meditation or something. So I did this podcast recently, and this woman was like really eager to have me on, and she said, I had this owl experience, and it was really, wow, it was rough. I was really, like I was like, oh, she was like, you could just tell she was frightened. It was bad. And this was before it was like one of those podcasts where there was a few hosts, and before they had other people that logged in and stuff. And I said, I mean, I could tell she was not at peace with what had happened with this owl. I never heard the owl story. And all I asked was, what happened after the owl? What happened after the experience? And she gave me this look like, maybe it wasn't bad. And I was like, and then all of a sudden the conversation moved on. I never got back to hear her owl story. And I was like, I could see her anxiety turn into like wonderment from one question. What happened after? I don't know what happened after. I could guess, but this is like baked into these stories. And it's not 100%, they don't all, I mean, I've talked to some people who had some dark, scary events, and some people whose lives have gone off the rails, but at the same time, those are the lesser number, but the higher number is that people have had a reassuring set of events. That's the best word I can come up. Heartening would be another one. So there's something reassuring in these stories. The woman who had the cancer and went through with chemotherapy and is afraid of nothing. That's a great story. And I don't want to force other people's experiences into the framework of her story, but I really see it, that people change because of these experiences, and they often like quit their jobs, or they follow a different path, or they start studying Reiki, or they become hypnotherapists, or
So do you think then, are you receiving more letters or emails, I should say, about deer experiences in the same way?
No, I just got a few. For some reason, I can't remember what it was, but I got a deer letter just recently from someone. It's kind of stayed at the same small percentage. Here's the thing: like right on my blog, it says I'm the owl guy. I'm not the deer guy. And it's like I'm asking for. Right, it says I want to hear your owl stories, and people are sending their owl stories. So I'm not really asking for the deer stories. In a way, I want this woman Margaret to take up the torch and collect the deer stories.
Yes.
I don't know whether she did. I mean, I've told her as much, and she didn't. I kind of said, "Oh, you should do it," and she didn't seem interested. But I mean, it's a curse almost to, it's a blessing and a curse to take on this role. I mean, you're doing the same thing with these fairy stories, where you're collecting like modern stories of people who have fairy experiences, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I bet you they're not easy to categorize. I bet you there's a wide disparity in what people are reporting. I'm just saying because the owl story has this, and what is the common thread is really tough to try to answer that.
Yeah, I mean, there are, but what you talked about with flavor and mood, there's definitely a sense that I feel with a lot of these stories. And I think that to categorize them is, I think it doesn't work for the fairy realm. And I know people do. I know people do decide to place them into categories. But for me, that's the kind of thing that us human beings were doing, in Victorian times, sort of going into the natural world, weren't we? And classifying and categorizing and capturing and showing, this is this, and we know it. You can't define in that kind of way with fairy realm. But having said that, there are, like you're finding with the owl experiences, people that they sit at the edge of thresholds for human beings. Fairy experiences will sit at the edge of, I mean, fairies are at the edge of thresholds anyway. In our fairy stories, we always find them under a bridge, or, in the water, or, they are not quite in this realm. They're always on the edges. They appear in times of our lives, those thresholds too. Maybe when we're going through something big in our lives or about to. And so that's kind of how they rise. So you do get that thread running through. You get a sense of a gnosis, because you can't unsee what you've seen. Focus on fairy sightings. And so they're never the same afterwards. And there's often a sense of familiarity. We know these beings deeply. And it's the same with owls, like we were saying before.
Well, it's UFO experiences too.
Yes.
Very commonly reported, where people will see a gray being in their living room or something, and they're like, "Oh, I know that being." And how do they, like, that doesn't make any sense at all,
Yep. So it's there's something, and I hadn't thought of it like that before, that perhaps they are kind of using that as a means, the fact that these archetypes are heavily stamped into our soul in some way, and yeah, I'm thinking about that. For me, it's a sense of, I feel like it's a sense of where we've come from. And I guess that's something that I talk about in my book, the never-ending book, that, well, it will end and it will be finished, but it's taking a long time because
it does, yeah.
Oh my goodness, I really need the space to do it, and that's hard when you have a family and you're doing all these things, and lots of lovely things that I really love doing, but at the same time you need space to write, don't you? But it needs to come through in its own way, and it is, but it's doing that slowly. But yeah, so I'm wondering now, Mike, if you might get a load of people contacting you with their dear stories. So apologies for
Oh,
that.
I would love that. Yes, I have no problem. I should just put a little thing on and I'm not, like, I'm doing my very best to let go and just sort of abandon myself to this research. And even though I'm writing fiction, it feels totally tied into the research, and I'm trying I mean, I kind of know, it's very interesting. I know the movies I like, and I know how, like, I picture the novel in my mind as a movie. So that's how I totally see it, as a movie. And so, like, I sometimes will call it a movie, even though it's a book. But I'm trying to just let it, like, I'm trying to get out of the way of the process as best I can. Yeah.
Yeah, that's always the best way. Well, I really look forward to reading it. I'm catching up on both your books, because as I've had as I was saying at the beginning, I'm only ever reading books that are to do with my research. So and I've got big piles of these books. But as you pointed out, this kind of does actually tie into my research, because of that thread that runs through it. So I think what we will do is get into your book when we're on our summer holidays. We're going to have a break as a family. So I know my husband will be, interested in reading it too. So that's what we'll do. So yeah, so here we are at the start of this SpectreVision journey. I'm sure we'll have another chat soon. We'll definitely come back when your book comes out.
It's not going to be soon.
No, but that's fine. And yeah, we will see how this journey unfurls. And I've got a feeling we're going to have lots of dear synchronicities now as well. But it's been so nice to catch up with you, Mike. And yeah,
Good. This has been a delight, just a joy.
yeah, it really has been lovely. And we'll speak again soon. And good luck with your projects. Are you off talking in any upcoming conferences? Because I know you do a lot of
I'm
that.
going to be going in a few weeks. I go to a conference in southern Colorado, which is a beautiful time of the year in the late summer to be in the Rockies, and it's the part of the world I lived in for a long time. So I'll be speaking at a conference that's run outdoors, and there's a handful of folks there that I haven't seen in a long time that it would be great to connect with again. So that'll be coming up in a couple of weeks.
That sounds really good. And do you know what? I'm really tempted to ask you, when was your last owl experience? Have you had any kind of recentish?
Oh, I'm just thinking a couple of, like, let me think for a second. I mean, I see him all the time. Wait, there was one I just saw. Oh, you know what? Okay, so the problem is to tell any story that involves a synchronicity, you gotta like just every thread in the sweater has its own story fighting to tell itself. So I interviewed a woman who wrote about out of body experiences, and her name is Samantha Treasure.
Yes, yes, yes. I saw this on your podcast, Hidden Experience. Right.
We talked, so we were supposed to do an interview in the middle of the month, and it turned out to end up to be at the end of the month, and it was fine and stuff like that. And I said, "Oh, let's try this day." And oh, let's just, so it ended up. So I was listening to, I was listening to her book on an audiobook, and I was keeping notes. I'm like, "Oh, this would be a good question to ask." And then it took a couple of weeks before we actually did the interview, so I had all the questions ready. But there was a point when I was listening to the book, and she mentioned hemisync audio. Do you know what that is? The hemispheric synchronization. Robert Monroe,
Yes.
the
Yeah.
Monroe, he has these, you put headphones on, and it's called binaural beat, and there's just a tone in one ear and a tone in another ear, and they're ever so slightly off. And what it does is it forces your two hemispheres of your brain to synchronize. So your logical and your intuitive side synchronize. And on a very low level, let's say, or like what we could all agree on is that it allows people to meditate, beginner meditators, to get to a very deep place of meditation quickly. That has been, that I feel that that's a fact that's been borne out by their research. And then they make the claims that all kinds of paranormal and I'm certain these things take place at the Monroe Institute, where they've been doing the research on this. So she mentions this. I'm on the trail, and I think to myself, "Hey, I have my own funny hemisync story," which I do. And so as I have that thought, same kind of thing, where it was like I'm listening to her voice, she's talking about the hemisync audio. I think I have my own hemisync audio story, and then a big owl flies right in front of me. It's not quite, if I reached my arm out, I wouldn't have been able to touch it, but it was pretty close. It wasn't like way far off. It was just like within a body length of me, and it crossed the path, and it flew. It was a big, beautiful barred owl, and big, and they fly very quietly, and it was just this perfect sighting. And I had to kind of like back engineer a little bit, like what was I talking about? And I was like, I was actually kind of thinking like, oh, I don't want to bring that up in the interview. And I was like, well, I'm going to bring that up. And so we forgot about talking about that when I did the interview, because it had been 2 weeks, and I found my notes, and I was editing her audio, and I was like, wait a minute, I did the whole thing. And I was like, I called her up and I said, let's do another half hour. I want to tell you my story. And she's like, great. So I have this complicated story. I could tell you now if you want, but it's basically, you want to hear it or?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm meditating. This is right after, like, I had a powerful experience, which I call my confirmation experience. So I had my confirmation experience in 2013, where basically, like, I know this happened to me. And it was because I camped out at this night in southern Utah, and there was like a thing that looked like a landed flying saucer. Like, I woke up and could see it on top of a hilltop, and this story goes on and on and on and on, and connects to so much other stuff. But at the end of this night, I got up the next day, and I was like, I had this like psychic knowing, boom, that it's real. And I'll tell you, so this happened March 10th. I had the slept outside of 2013. March 11th, I went home and compulsively wrote notes and put dots on maps and wrote a blog post and recreated what this round structure on the hill looked like. And then that all culminated in like, boom, this psychic knowing where this is real. No doubt about it. This is real. And I've never wavered since then. And then the day after, I started writing the book, The Messengers. Like the day after. So like within like 48 hours of seeing this thing on a hilltop, I started the book that has come to define my life. Now, so I'm many months later, and I think it was the same year, I'm on my little meditation stool. A friend of mine who sent me the HemiSync audio, I'm listening to with earbuds and with an iPod. That tells how long ago it was. And there's Robert Monroe has this kind of radio announcer voice. He was a radio announcer in like the 1940s, and these tapes were made in the 1970s. So they're these very simple, they're actually pretty nice, this kind of guided meditation. But he's got this kind of radio announcer voice, and he says, so I'm there totally quiet in my living room. And he said, in his Robert Monroe deep voice, he says, "You will take the fingers of your right hand, and when I say so, you will touch your forehead, the center of your forehead, with the fingertips of your right hand. And when you do, the issue that has been hidden from you will be revealed." And I'm like in this totally calm mood, right? It's like, and there's like this kind of hiss, this that's all you get for the HemiSync audio. And I'm totally calm, and he says, "And do so now." So I touch the fingertips to my head, and I get this totally clear image of me, absolutely vivid, crystal clear, like photographic snapshot just goes boom, appears in my mind. It's like a still photograph, and it's me lying in the desert floor in the spot where I slept out on March 10th, and I'm surrounded by 5, I think I drew 6. I drew it. I did a very detailed drawing of it, where I'm surrounded by 6 gray aliens. And I was totally in this calm state. So I had no emotional reaction. It was just like, oh, I guess that's what's being revealed. So he couldn't have been clearer. He says, the issue that you have, the issue at hand, the issue that needs to be revealed will be revealed. I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was pretty close to that. So I tell this story to Samantha, and we go round and round a little bit. And then she says, "Oh, I had this experience like this, and I had these marks on my body when I was growing up. And my dad, like I had this drops of blood on my foot that were totally in a symmetrical line, 3 drops of blood, exactly the same size." And she went on to list all these things that sound exactly like the things that people who have UFO contact report. Stories her brother was telling about the house, and she's doing this very advanced form of, let me say it this way. She's doing excellent work researching the out-of-body experience. And so I never would have had this follow-up. So she basically says, "I think I'm a UFO abductee." She doesn't say it in so many words, but wow, she says it. And she says it after I contacted her again and said, "We got to do another podcast because of that owl." She's like, "Okay." And the conversation just sort of organically went there. Now, here's a funny little thing. Her name is Samantha Treasure, right? Which is a great name. But Samantha, the first 5 letters are S-A-M-A-N. And in Russian, that's the anthropologist who came up with the word shaman. Shaman is a new word for like modern English. Mm. And that came from an anthropologist who studied in Russia. The shamans in Russia. So that the word shaman comes from the word saman, and the word in Russian is shaman. It's the same word that we use for, you would say shaman. In America, we would say shaman, but it's the same word that the Russians use, but it's spelled S-A-M-A-N. So you spell out Samantha Treasure, it spells out S-A-M-A-N, saman or shaman, that reassure. So it says, shaman that reassure. Isn't that? And she has got the gentlest, most, and I said it earlier, like that's what's embedded in the mystery to me. These are reassuring stories. I told her that and I said, have you ever noticed that? And she laughed so hard. She said, I never knew that. Like that's in my reassure is spelled wrong. So it's not, it's a little, I had to cheat a little bit. So there, this is the problem. I guess one little question, like, and then I had to go round and round and round to tell you this long, complex story that has almost no meaning except for how it makes me feel.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, if people aren't familiar with that story, the one that you spoke about, where you say you were surrounded, when you looked back to that experience, you were surrounded by these aliens, Grace. If I'm not mistaken, on that occasion, you had been surrounded by many owls. So that's how the experience, is that correct? That
No, there was another, so that night, this is the problem, it's very complicated. So that night, I had two coyotes howling near my head. I couldn't see them. I sat up and I couldn't see them. And then there was another night some years earlier, actually quite far away, where I had an experience where there was an owl in a bush while a friend of mine saw an orb. And then these experiences, like I got so obsessed. These lined up on a map. And I mean, to tell this story correctly, I had a psychic vision that showed me a map with 3 points lined up.
mm-hmm.
And then I just had to go and I created the map. I do outdoor work. I create maps all the time. It's totally second nature to me. So I created a map. I just using Google Maps, nothing complex. And these 3 events lined up with like an exactness that is just defies all probability, where they lined up absolutely, and you can zoom into every little point, and I have the GPS coordinates of 3 different points where I had what, as far as I can tell, feel like UFO contact experiences or abduction type experiences. And this is this is, you've heard the whole complex story. It goes on and on and on. So I did, there's an owl and a UFO connected to one of the events that would have been in 2010. And that, and so to make things even more complicated, 2 points, I was with a very close friend. We were dating at the time. Her name is Natasha. So 2 of the events in the line, I was with Natasha. We both had what feel like UFO contact events. She's a great storyteller, so she's a great witness. She and I share these stories. They're like we keep each other in check. We don't let either of us exaggerate, but wow, they're powerful stories. So and they lined up in the third story where I was alone was March 10th, 2013. March 10th is Natasha's birthday. Like if I could go on, and these stories are just filled with those kind of synchronicities of that same kind of power.
Mind-blowing. Love it. I love it. And they certainly do follow you around. I almost forgot, Mike. I had asked my Patreon group if they had any questions for you. And so I'm going to have to...
Oh, please do. Yeah, I feel great. So bring them on.
Stronger. Oh, my goodness. Okay. Right. All right. So I'm looking now. So this is from Arthur, he is just fantastic. Arthur, a member of the group. He always has fantastic recommendations. So he's got a few questions here. I'm going to ask several variations around the same question because the original question may be too big and involve too much backstory to fit into an episode, even though I'd love to have an answer, but I fully understand anyway, I'll go for the questions. As someone who's been out to Chris Bledsoe's home, seen physical evidence of his experiences, what do you think about his claim that Jesus Christ is returning to Earth in Easter 2026?
Oh, I've heard. So I'm very cautious of predictions like that. So he's just the messenger, right? So I fully feel someone or some force, let's say, like if he got that message and he's relaying it, I'm sure he's being accurate. I would actually say he's probably being cautious. He probably has more information, a little more, not much, but he's been trying to be as open as he possibly can. Yeah. Isn't that interesting? And at the same time, he also feels that the divine feminine is making a return, or that's the message that he received from the lady. So, and then you look at the world events right now, like, wow, it's kind of tumultuous. And like, I mean, whatever. I'd look at, I mean, it's pretty disheartening to read the newspaper. So I can't speak to whether Jesus will return, but Christ consciousness, I don't know, is that a synonym for the goddess energy?
I mean, a friend used to talk about that kind of era. So obviously Christ came in when in the Piscean era, but you know
Hmm.
the message was completely skewed by what the Roman Empire did anyway with the religion. Um, but you know, Christ walked around with in heart chakra basically, which is what we are going into now. You know, he could heal. He saw everyone as equal. Whereas this whole
Oh, yeah.
last 2,000 years has been very much more sort of solar plexus, one bit, you know, all around power battles and all around ego and then the individual and the one God and going through connection with the divine via an in and in between, I can't think what the word is, but you know, whether it be a priest or whether it be through religion, rather than having your own connection. Whereas Jesus had said that we can all have these connections, that we can all speak to God, that we are all God's children, and you know, so he was much more kind of heart chakra. So in that respect, I'd say yes. And I feel also that for me, with this kind of the deer experience and the return of the goddess, it feels like the deer synchronicities, they're preparing us for something. I feel like Artemis personally, when I had that experience, it felt like I was being called to do something, and I don't know what
Hmm.
that is. But nevertheless, I trust in her, and I am allowing myself to be guided by her. And I don't know what that means or where it leads to or any of the rest of it. So I'm with you there in that we're 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 going into something, and I feel like we're being guided towards that. So yeah, I'm not sure about Jesus Christ returning to Earth either, but I think it's really interesting, and
Hmm.
certainly seems to have a very very strong connection.
Yeah, we could use a whole lot of love thy neighbor right now. Yeah. So,
Um, his next question is: when people have experiences with or receive messages from the other, to what extent should they treat them as literal versus metaphorical communications?
well, that's the thing. You go back and forth. I mean, so I think you're making a mistake if you treat them as literal. Like I think you're gonna. So like Chris Bledsoe gets the message Jesus is coming back at Easter,
Mm.
and if you take that literally, then you want a guy with a beard and holes in his hands, but that might not be how it plays out. But if it's taken metaphorically as Christ consciousness or Christ energy, then that could mean a whole array of things. And so yeah, that's what I've been trying to say in a way, is that like I'm trying to step out of the way of the literal and just allow the power of these stories to emerge, where oftentimes these paranormal stories or these owl stories or these UFO stories or these dream stories, they they need to be addressed symbolically and not literally. So for me, you have to like you have to like if you're going to write a book, you have to make sure your commas and your periods are all in the right place. So you have to there's like a logical format to present your mystical experience, and those are contradictory, right? Um, so you have to I think you have to be literal, but as little as possible, and allow the archetypal, mystical, intuitive, unconscious to to present itself as openly and as freely as possible.
Yeah, I agree with that. I tend to find that the universe definitely speaks to me through metaphor. And also when I'm doing healings, the images that I see are often, when I pass that back to the person, it's often not a literal thing. Sometimes it is a metaphor, so a symbol of some kind. And those are the most powerful messages we receive
Mm.
at a really deep level, much deeper than any kind of literal message could have been. Again, it's that knowingness, it's that the stamp on somewhere, some kind of part of us that, we get the message. And it couldn't have landed any other way. So that's a really strong um, mechanism of
Hmm.
messages.
Oh, symbolically, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Chris Bledsoe saw the bull and the lady in white floating in midair. Those are symbols, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So last one. In established mystical traditions, when people following the appropriate practices start having strange experiences, their teachers always tell them to ignore them. In the paranormal community, we focus on them. Are we spending our time being distracted by the distractions? That's a really good question.
Well, the Tic Tac that flew above the aircraft carrier in 2007 or whatever it was, to me is a distraction. I think a huge amount of energy is going in the UFO community. I'm talking just about the UFO community, which is where I seem to be, even though I am less interested in it lately. Um, the that what disclosure might mean, what the government might know, what's really on these videotapes that were taken by Navy pilots that fly off of aircraft carriers. In, oh my gosh, like it's analyze the frame by frame by frame, and you're looking through the wrong end of the microscope, right? Like I would love to ask, and I there's people who were involved in that event. There was a guy who was on the radar, looking at the radar at that event, and didn't see the UFO, but was tracking it on the radar, right? So there's like, so he's like on the, you know, these little dots are moving on his radar screen. And then he went on to have mystical experiences and powerful synchronistic experiences. And there's a few people who have that story. They weren't, I would love to, here's the question I want to ask. I want to ask these pilots, have you ever had any odd owl experiences? Or the 4 questions. How's your psychic abilities? Do you have any healing abilities? How's your life changed after?
Mhm.
The guys who are interested in the nuts and bolts stuff, they want to know about, like, I don't know, like all the stuff about little flecks of metal that they find in the desert, and they put it under electron microscopes and try to figure out how much magnesium compared to aluminum is in this little isotope. I'm I'm like, I guess that's important, and it's information that I make. This is awful, and I get in trouble for this a little bit, but it's true. That's totally guy energy. That's what men love to do. Men love to talk about like engineering and combat jet pilots, and that's like, men love that shit. And I'm like, I've got no patience for it at all. And I want to talk about emotions and feelings and dreams and intuition and how it makes you feel and the mythic meaning and I say that because it's really truly a part of me, and I really love that to play in those waters. And at the same time, I find that all that engineering stuff is a distraction. And so I can't even remember what his original question was. Yeah, but like I would say, right. So I have gone to this. I've measured a burn mark in the yard in Chris Bledsoe's backyard. I helped another person was there. I took the tape measure and we measured it. We wrote it down in a little book. I don't know. So somewhere in a little book it says that circle is 8 meters wide. I don't know. I'm making it up. That's about how big it was. I don't know. That's in the book somewhere. That's books in a file cabinet somewhere. Like, how's that going to change the world?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, we're kind of thinking about the Tic Tac ongoing revelations. It's a kind of, we're looking out there instead of kind of looking in here. It's
Exactly. Yeah.
a thing. And we really need to start looking at, okay, well, what's the meaning behind this? What's coming up? So yeah, that is a distraction. So if he's asking, are we being distracted by the distractions? Well, I mean, the other way to look at it is that if that is an opening for people as well, because not everybody would be prepared or want to look at the kinds of things that we're looking at because it's just too much. It's just too much. They're just not ready for that. They don't want to know. And so if this is something that garners interest in some way because the government's taking it seriously, that just might be enough to kind of pique somebody's interest, just to open a little crack for them to start thinking, oh, okay, so if that's, so if these things happen and this is kind of being taken, what else? That, in effect, these sort of investigations might be doing work, important work for people that need to open up a little. So I guess it's that whole thing, isn't it? Is that if everything was as it should be, like we look at things and we think, well, why on earth is this TikTok thing being
Yeah,
taken over? Well, maybe it's because it's doing a job that we don't really understand because we're on top of it at the moment. But if we have kind of an overview, maybe it'll make sense in the long term as to why it's a thing.
All I can do is the best research I can do in the most open-hearted way I can do it,
Yeah.
and to speak as unfiltered as I can about what I feel. And I'm very, like, there's a lot I don't know, but I know what I feel, and and I and that's all. I mean, I'm writing that book. The Messengers is popular. I mean, I know how books sell. It's not that popular in the sense that whose book is popular is Chris Bledsoe's book, selling amazingly well, and his story is totally mystical. Oh my goodness, mystical in a very honest way. Where he's very unfiltered, where I feel like I kind of take a few steps back every once in a while and say, oh, well, this tapping into the unconscious, and I don't actually even really know what that means. You want to get right down to it, but I know how it feels to say it. And Chris's book it's a piece having psychic experiences. He's healing people. Chris is healing people, and his family has changed, and his relationship with this mystery has changed profoundly since his initial experiences, which I think were 2007. So that's that book. His book is called UFO of God. I mean, it doesn't get much more mystical than that. So
I'm going to get that book. I will get that book and I will add it to my ever-growing pile.
no, I'm not trying to make your pile bigger. I apologize. I'm bringing up all these books.
But I think, no, I mean, Arthur is a huge fan of your work. So I think it was just a question around, the distinction between the way that we are really leaning into these experiences. Now, I feel that this is the time to be doing that. My feeling is that there is a hunger for that. There's a need for that because we are making a huge transition. This time we're living through, we are making a huge transition from one world to the next. And this is what it's about. And for people will have different experiences and be moving through that transition in their own way. But I think this is actually the time if you take that idea of the teacher saying to the experiencer or their pupil, stop being distracted, or don't focus on the distractions. I think this is a time where we actually really need to lean into those divine experiences and prepare ourselves for what's to come, for something which we don't know at the moment or can't quite put into words, and we can't know, but I think we can trust it because it certainly feels right to me. I know, like you're saying, you receive a lot of messages every day, and so do I. There's something happening. It's an honor to be doing this, isn't it? And it's always good to check in with people like yourself who are experiencing this too. It's sort of aiding this somehow.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, it's been so great to chat, Mike, and thank you for your time. I've kept you super, super late.
Oh, it's been a joy. I'm enjoying every minute of it. So
Yeah, and I hope we get to meet in person at some point. Either I'll hop over there, or if you are coming to the UK at any point, please let us know.
oh yeah.
You must would like to come and hear you speak if you did that. So, and yeah, enjoy the rest of the summer, and we shall speak again soon.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mike.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening and watching. If you enjoyed the podcast, please consider joining us on Patreon for dozens more episodes of unreleased bonus content, monthly online events, and a private chat. We are a warm, supportive community, and it really helps to support the project. Find us on patreon.com/the Modern Fairy Sightings Podcast.
SpectreVision Radio.